Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan Muna, and I'm the Secretary of the Social Housing Action Campaign. I'm really sorry not to be there in person, despite my attempts. I'm going to take you through the presentation we prepared on service charges. The Social Housing Action Campaign is overwhelmingly made up of tenants and residents of housing associations. Our campaigns are democratically directed. Service charges have been one of our biggest campaign themes since 2021. The issues have become more acute with the cost of living crisis, but were in existence even before then. FindOthers is a free online platform that bridges the gap between campaigning and legal action. They help victims of injustices to group together and pursue collective action, and they recently teamed up with SHAC. We've got four major pieces of evidence. We've got a qualitative survey, which maps out the different ways in which service charge abuse occurs, a quantitative survey that maps out the impact on tenants and residents. There's a leaks report from the Peabody scrutiny panel that Peabody tried to suppress from publication. Normal practice is that as soon as a scrutiny panel report is complete, it's published on the Peabody website. This time they refused to do it until the report was actually leaked to SHAC, and we published it on our website, and then Peabody followed. We've got whistleblowing evidence, not from an individual, but from an entire managing agent company that was deeply concerned about what the landlord, the housing association, was asking them to do. What we found is that the evidence from both the Peabody leaks report and from the managing agent company triangulated really well with the evidence that we had, and gave us assurance that actually what we were presenting was a true picture of what was going on across the sector. Obviously, these combine with a never-ending stream of individual complaints to SHAC. Sometimes these are from an individual but relate to an entire estate, and now via the FindOthers platform. We found items are overcharged for the items that are charged for change inexplicably every year. So there's a different list of items that are being sent through. The items are charged for but not provided. So, for example, a lift maintenance where there is no lift in existence, or they're provided to a very poor standard. We've seen extortionate and ever-increasing service charge levels for very basic services that could be provided at a much more cost-effective level, and inequitable charging for identical services to identical properties. And we think we know why this is. It's to do with inaccuracies in the way that costs are allocated across different flats, but obviously is an injustice to those who are actually living in those flats. And also that the legally required processes just aren't being followed. We've got one example we're going to share today. So this is Michael, who successfully reclaimed $318,000 for his building after lodging a complaint with a first-tier tribunal. He ended up representing himself. He was initially quoted £45,000 by law firms to represent his case. He didn't have this money. The estate couldn't raise the money at that level. So he was able to represent. He's retired, and he was also in quite a highly skilled job. He was very comfortable with bureaucracy, very financially articulate. So he was able to work through the service charge packs and to present the evidence to the court. But a lot of people don't have the funds, the skill, the time, or the confidence to actually challenge incorrect, inaccurate service charges. What we've found through the evidence collected through the online platform, which is shown here, from FindOthers, was that over £2 million worth of overcharging was reported by just 27 people. So we've got evidence of that level of overcharging. We have to say there was a minimal undercharging. There were occasionally inaccuracies that resulted in undercharging, but these were very, very few and far between. The vast majority of inaccuracies are in favour of the landlord. 250 people have used the Section 21, Section 22 request tool that obviously only applies to some tenants and residents anyway. These the worst offenders are Clarion, MTV, Southern Housing Group. Around a quarter received no response within the legal time frame of 30 days. Around 12% ended up moving through to the complaints process, and only 1.2% of these received a satisfactory response. It really underscores just how difficult it is to work through the processes that are provided to get to a point where you're satisfied with your service charging. The issues that people are trying to get addressed are obviously take a lot of time. It's extremely frustrating because you have to keep going back to the landlord over and over again. Personnel change, people don't give you a call back. So you're constantly on this hamster wheel of trying to get the landlord to engage genuinely over the issues. And it can be futile. There is a constant resistance by the landlords. They won't provide invoices and receipts for scrutiny by the tenants and residents. Quite often that takes quite a lot of time, even just to get information about what you're meant to be paying for. Inaccuracies are never accepted from the get-go. You have to battle to get the landlord to accept that. Overpayments aren't always refunded. There's no changing of processes to stop the same inaccuracies being repeated year on year. And that's something that actually Michael has already found. Despite reclaiming that much money, he has now received a fresh invoice pack that shows the same errors popping up again. Complaints are now being closed before they're even resolved, which has to do with the deadlines that are provided. We think that they're closed after a certain amount of time, even if there hasn't been a satisfactory outcome and the tenant or resident has to start the process again from scratch. Quite often they're just left hanging. So a couple of particularly noteworthy examples. Places for People now says that it won't refund any service charge overpayments. It doesn't matter how inaccurate it is or how big it is, you won't get a refund for any service charge inaccuracies. Hyde Housing changed its complaints policy to say that it wouldn't investigate any rent or service charge complaints. When we made a public outcry about this, Hyde changed its complaint policy again to say that those complaints will be taken through a separate process. But actually the call centre quite often refuses, and the frontline staff refuse to accept service charge complaints. They just say that that's no longer part of the policy. So there is a disconnect between what the policy actually says now because of this and what actually happens in practice. Based on our results, we believe that there's a major national scandal taking place. If you extrapolate these results across the whole of the housing association population, it is a major national scandal of service charge abuse. It's also an abuse of government taxpayer money because a lot of housing associations receive a lot of money through the benefit system to cover service charges. And at the moment, there is absolutely no process of scrutiny for those service charges. And how could the DWP actually scrutinise when it takes so much effort just for each person to do it? If you scale that up, it wouldn't be possible for the DWP to do it. So we are left with a situation where there is no scrutiny at all. Access to the justice to the courts is virtually non-existent. I'm sure a lot of people will already be aware of this. There's no legal aid. People can't afford to self-fund. The legal fees are not recoverable anyway. Therefore, solicitors don't want to take the cases on. And obviously, when it comes to self-representation, most people don't have the confidence to do that or other resources. We've been taking this presentation around a slightly fuller version of this, around to Department for Levelling Up. We've also spoken to the Regulator of Social Housing and the National Audit Office. Baroness Scott was quite open to our ideas, and we're going to be meeting with her again in the autumn to take her through some more of the evidence and to discuss some of the steps we'd like to see in place. It's not hard to see why one of our members describes service charges as a war zone where only one side is armed. I think what I would want to add on to here, we quite often get a response from housing association executives when we meet with them that it's an extremely large and complex process and therefore mistakes are inevitable. What we would say to that is housing associations' own corporate accounts are already also large and complex, and yet they are not riddled with inaccuracies to anywhere near the same degree that we see with service charges. We know that housing associations can get it right, but they're just not putting the resources into getting it right when it comes to service charges. And that's why we describe it as service charge abuse. I think that's all I'm going to say here, except that obviously I won't be able to take part in any question and answer session. So if anyone does have, we would love to engage with housing associations over this. If anyone does have any questions, please do get in touch with us. Our email address is shac.action@gmail.com. And I wish you all the best for the rest of your conference. Thank you.